Okay, thanks for your patience, everyone, and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be. This is Vincent Sweeney. I'm the head of the Caribbean Sub-Regional Office for the United Nations Environment Program. And welcome to this fifth webinar in our monthly series, which started back in April. As you all will be aware, we're going to be focusing on electric mobility in the Caribbean. And the session today, which is supposed to go for about an hour, is going to be moderated by one of our UNEP colleagues, Miss Georgina Singh, or as we know her as Gina. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Gina, and I will come back at the very end just to wrap up. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Vincent. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. Thank you all for joining us for another exciting session hosted by the UN Environment Program's Caribbean Sub-Regional Office. As Vincent said, I'm Gina. I'm the Communications Assistant at the UNEP Cartagena Convention Secretariat, and I'll be with you this afternoon. Joining us today to share on the subject of electric mobility in the Caribbean are two experts from the UNEP Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, Mr. Esteban Bermudez and Ms. Jone Orbea. Esteban, Jone, bienvenidos y muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros el día de hoy. As we move ahead, just to point out for anyone who may not be totally familiar with UNEP's work, promoting sustainable transport and clean mobility is one of the priorities of UNEP as the leading global authority on environmental issues. Transport, as we know, drives economic activity and is fundamental to human welfare, but the sector also has significant impacts on the environment and human health. So the work of UNEP in this context focuses on promoting sustainable, low-emission transport across the world and how to reduce the sector's contribution to air pollution and climate change. Through UNEP's electric mobility program, which our panelists will speak a bit more on, the organization works with countries to support their transition from the use of fossil fuels to electric vehicles. This type of support includes the development of policies, exchange of best practices, piloting technology options, tracking electric vehicle uptake, calculating emissions and economic benefits, and many others. And our panelists, as I mentioned, will tell us a bit more about the electric mobility projects that UNEP has undertaken in the region to help countries make the transition towards sustainable transport, as well as reduce emissions and fulfill their commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change. Especially as it relates to English-speaking countries in the Caribbean, our panelists will also give us an overview of the policies and general efforts that have been taking place to implement sustainable mobility in countries such as Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Grenada, Jamaica, and St. Lucia. We also want to hear from you, and thank you all again so much for joining. We want to hear what are your thoughts on this issue, what you think are some of the challenges to further the progress of electric mobility in the Caribbean. As a consumer, have you had any personal experience with using electric vehicles? What are your views? At this time, I would just like to remind you, please, out of respect for our panelists and our other participants joining us at this time, to kindly mute your mics so that the discussion can flow freely. Remember to use up the chat box, send us your comments, send us your questions for our panelists, and we'll have an interactive question and answer segment at the end of our second session. And our panelists will happily share their feedback on your queries. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our first speaker for this afternoon, Esteban Bermudez. He is the Portfolio Manager of Climate Change Mitigation at the UNEP's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, located in Panama. He has more than 12 years of experience working in the energy and the transport industry. He is an electrical engineer by training, and he has a master's degree in sustainable energy technology from Delft Technology University. Esteban, welcome again, and I hand over to you now.
Thank you very much, Gina, and thank you very much for the invitation. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not as yet, no.
Okay, just a second. Let me try it again. Okay, I guess you can see it now, right?
Yes, all good.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll turn off my camera in case of the bandwidth. So thank you very much for the invitation. As Gina was mentioning, we have been working in electric mobility in the region over the last 4 years. I will start by giving a brief introduction of our work, and then Jone will explain you a bit more about the status of electric mobility in the region. So our regional platform started by giving webinars on various topics related to electric mobility. We have a network of around 1,800 participants, and we have monthly webinars. As we will discuss later, we're starting with sessions in the Caribbean. So we'll be very happy to receive your feedback about this. The community of practice also has been very keen on keeping track of the status of this technology in our region, because some years ago we felt that there was a blank in the information that was gathered about the deployment of the technology. So it seemed like other regions around the world, like Europe, Asia, or North America, were moving very fast, but there was not much information about how it was evolving in the region. So over the last 3 years, we have been publishing a status report that is available in our website. We have also developed some guidelines, for example, one of which is related to the development of national electric mobility strategies. So it has been employed by governments around the region like Panama, Colombia, Argentina, and Paraguay to steer the development of the technology based on the local context and priorities. This year, we will start with 4 more Central American countries in the deployment of their national electric mobility strategies, but we're happy to help other countries in the region interested in conducting such effort. As well, the practical guideline is available in our website, so if anybody connected wants to have access to it, we can share it as well. Regarding high-level political dialogue, we have been participating in different spheres, trying to connect legislators around the region who are working on laws related to this topic. Also promoting high-level political dialogue. For example, in 2018, several countries, 14 countries to be more specific, from the region, agreed that regional collaboration was important to promote electric mobility, and some of these countries proposed the first UN resolution on sustainable mobility last year. We have also been working with countries in a bit more deeper technical assistance. For example, in Costa Rica, we have been working in the capital to analyze the current operational conditions for diesel buses so that we can propose tailor-made electric bus alternatives that can be introduced in the country. So far, we have analyzed using a big data approach over 40% of the bus lines, and we have been able to give to the country the specific typology of the buses that could be introduced in the country, as well as some other activities related to training. And we have different initiatives in 21 countries, some of which are in the Caribbean sub-region. Johnny will explain a bit more about this, but there are some projects related to the Global Environment Facility that are just, some of them are just starting and some of them are in the design stage. But we also have other regional projects that we're just starting related to regional collaboration and this technical assistance to create an enabling ecosystem for the deployment of electric mobility in Latin America and the Caribbean. So why are we doing all this? And our mandate, of course, is the Paris Agreement. In order to comply with the Paris Agreement and keep the rise in global temperature below 1.5 degrees, our estimations have shown that we need to increase the level of ambition of climate action. So the business as usual emissions are on track to still increasing, and we need to conduct really ambitious reduction of those emissions in order to comply and avoid a catastrophic climate change consequences. The thing is that the sooner we act, the less drastic those measures will have to be. So in this slide, for example, if we would have started working 10 years ago based on the scientific warnings, the reduction of emissions would have had to be of around 3.3% every year, according to UNEP's emission gap report 2019. But right now, that number has to be around 7.6% more or less. And if we don't act soon, it will be almost impossible to revert the consequences of climate change. So on one hand, we have this very big and ambitious agenda related to climate change, but also air pollution is, as this slide shows, it's a silent killer. In many cities and countries around the world, it's responsible for the death of 7 million. It's responsible for the death of 7 million people. And the thing is that this is something that is affecting us right now. So some people see climate change as something that it can happen in the midterm, even though it's happening right now. But air pollution is something that is affecting us regardless of our age at this moment. So also it's very important to act. And transport, depending on each city and the composition of its economy or geography, it's one of the largest players in terms of air pollution. So of course we need to address it. The thing is that this pandemic and of course this quarantine that we hope that will end soon has shown some people that have lived all their lives in polluted cities that there is an alternative. Of course, we're not proposing to keep everybody inside their homes, but at least if we rely on clean technologies that have no tailpipe, we can see cities that have blue skies. So, and also numerous scientific papers have correlated COVID-19 with vulnerability of death. So because of exposure to bad air quality. So also it's very important to address air quality because of a public health matter. Relating power and transport, since they are very responsible for greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, this graph shows that transport and the power sector are responsible for around 67% of the fossil-based greenhouse gas emissions in our region, in Latin America and the Caribbean. and represent around a quarter of the whole emissions in the region. And the thing is that emissions are still growing, so we need to decouple these trends from the developing of our countries. So our approach at UNEP has been to couple the power sector and the transport sector to have a common approach to these agendas. We cannot have the cumulative advantage or benefits that can come from a clean electricity sector without addressing the transport sector that is responsible for all these emissions. So it's very interesting to rely on electric transport, given that many countries rely on a clean energy matrix, or at least are in the path to decarbonize their electricity matrix. Also, from a market perspective, the evolution of the lithium-ion prices are decreasing in a very, very clear trend. So as you can see in this graph, for example, since 2010 to 2018, the price of lithium-ion batteries have reduced for more than 85%. And of course, electrification is one solution among many in terms of transport, but we see it as a key driver in this decarbonization path. Also, what we have been seeing and we are experiencing right now, based on the projects we're working on, is that although cost parity of electric vehicles compared to internal combustion has not been achieved yet, in niche applications it's plausible already, and perhaps the initial cost can be higher for some technologies, but over the lifetime of the technology, given the reduction in operational and maintenance costs are lower for electric vehicles, the total cost of ownership can be lower for electric vehicles compared to internal combustion technologies, even now. So I'll hand over to my colleague, Jone, who will talk a bit more about this recent publication that we made about the status report of electric mobility in our region.
Thank you so much, Esteban, for that presentation. As we go now to Joni, let me just introduce her. She is the program lead for the MOVE program at UNEP Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. MOVE is acronym for Movilidad Electrica. Joni is an economist with a master's degree in international economics and development from the Complutense University of Madrid. She has more than 6 years of experience working on urban transportation and mobility in Latin America. And for the last 3 years, she has worked specifically in transport electrification projects. She previously worked for more than 5 years in the private and international public sectors on issues related to industrial analysis and macroeconomic development, as well as promoting sustainability in cities. Joni, thanks again for joining us, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Gina, for the presentation. And thank you so much for inviting us to present the work that we are doing in the region. I will just share my screen. Let me know, I think that you're already, right?
Yes.
Seeing my screen? Okay.
Yes, we can see it, all good.
Perfect. So as Esteban mentioned, I will talk about the status of electric mobility in the region, and then specifically in some Caribbean countries. So as Esteban said, this year we published the third status report on electric mobility in the Latin America and the Caribbean region for the last year 2019. And in terms of public policy and legal instruments, what we see is there is a huge difference among the countries. As you can see, there are some countries as Costa Rica or Colombia that they already have their national electromobility law that contains all the regulation and all the objectives that they have in terms of electromobility deployment in the country. There are some other countries that have they have some other countries that have developed strategies and not laws, such as Panama or Chile or Colombia again. And we have many countries that are in this progress of creating their strategies and laws that will guide the overall development of the electromobility in their respective countries. Nevertheless, even though many countries do not have comprehensive plan or program in terms of electromobility, many of them, almost all the countries in the region, do have some incentive, both fiscal and non-fiscal, to promote electromobility. So we have some countries that have fiscal incentives to buying electrical vehicles or to using electrical vehicles. They have differentiated electrical tariffs to pay for the charging, and they have regulations on how the charging stations or charging infrastructure should be developed, implemented, and then charged to the vehicle users. So there are many countries that do have already some instruments to provide the incentives for electric vehicles. Moreover, we see that there are many national and subnational governments that do have goals in terms of electrification. The goals do relate a lot to not only their NDCs or the overall objectives of decarbonization, but also to the measurements and to the possibilities on the range of their the economy, let's say. So we can see, for example, Colombia, that is saying 700,000 vehicles for 2030, not specifying which kind of vehicles at this point. And then we have some others that specified that percentage for, or a certain percentage of the private, or public electric vehicles should be electric by certain year. And then we have some other objectives that talk about an overall percentage of the total fleet in the country. So we have a lot of different approaches to the same goal of decarbonization of transport. At the end, what we saw in up to the last months of 2019 is that there are around or more than 6,000 new electric vehicles registered in the region. It could seem that is a high number, but actually compared to the ICE or internal combustion engines vehicles is still really low percentage. Regarding the charging infrastructure, we do have some countries that have not only urban charging infrastructure, but also electric corridors that make able or that habilitate the usage of electric vehicles, mainly private electric vehicles, to go from one country to another. We can see in the map, we have Chile, we have Brazil, we had Mexico with long corridors that connect various cities. Specifically in Mexico, what we've seen is that these electric corridors among the cities are being installed. The charging infrastructure is being installed by an alliance between the private sector and the electric distribution companies, both public and private. So it's a very ingenious way, it's a very efficient way to actually provide investment to create and to promote the electrification of the fleet in Mexico. In terms of public transportation, we know that public transportation and electric buses has been a main focus for many countries and many cities in the region. So we can see, and we have here in Chile, in our region, the second biggest urban fleet outside China. So it's a really good example to see how they achieve that level of electrification in the urban buses. But we do also have the new 33 electric buses that just came in Barbados this month. So it is also a really good example to see how that first step of electrification, that barrier has already overcome in the Caribbean region, and how much we can learn about that, right? In terms of Chile, as I said, is the urban largest fleet outside China for a single city. They have some of the buses running the same route, so they have 100% electric corridor in the capital city, in Santiago de Chile, that has been really successful among the users. They rate the route really good, not only because it's electrical, but also because obviously it's a new bus. They have AC, they have USB chargers, and obviously it does have no noise. Bogota, they just last year, they awarded almost 400 buses for the feeder routes of the main bus system in the city, Transmilenio. That is also really good to start eliminating that technological barrier for both the transport operators and also the users, so the users can get to a new better standard for public transportation. In the Dominican Republic, they have been buying electric taxis to be able to electrify up to 20% of the taxi fleet in the short term. There is also this these pilot projects that actually came with a lot of that comes normally with a lot of pressure from the government to have electric vehicles in the street, and that can really provide a lot of data to continue into the deployment of the vehicles, but also they can show the citywide that the electric transportation can do whatever ICE vehicle does in a city. So meaning there is no technological barrier for anything you may want to do in a city. Also, we have another range of electric mobility in the region, that is the micro-mobility. This type of mobility that is for last mile or more reduced short distance transportation, like electric vehicles or e-scooters, that have been implemented in many cities in the region for this, as I said, last mile mobility. In this last report of 2019, what we realized is there is a huge citizen participation. Many of the countries, almost all of them, if not all, have citizens creating NGOs or any other these kind of organizations to promote electrification of the routes that provide knowledge. They do trials, they do communication events, everything that is pushing for electrification and showing that it can be real and it can be possible in many of our countries. And finally, just to in the other side of electric mobility, not on the service side, but on the industry side, we've seen a lot of new and innovative business coming up in many countries. In the Caribbean, there's this company, Mega Power, that installs charging infrastructure that is starting in Barbados and then move around many other countries in the region. And as such, we have seen from companies doing infrastructure, charging infrastructure for vehicles, big companies that are turning into doing electric vehicles, as you see the second Bolt in Argentina, but also some others in Mexico. We have companies developing software for big fleets management. We have new developments regarding lithium, regarding batteries creation and fabrication, regarding batteries second-hand usage and reusage of the batteries and recycling of the batteries. So what we have seen is that there are many new businesses creating around the electrification of the fleet. And now more into what is going on in the Caribbean. With help from the CARICOM, there was created this regional electric vehicle strategy framework that sets the basics for the electrification of the transport electrification in the region, with four main pillars, as you saw in the presentation, and stating that the promotion of electrification could reduce fuel consumption by up to 73%. That actually comes really to impact many of the countries in the region, or in the Caribbean region, I mean, because of their fuel importation and consumption, and the GHG generation that comes with it. Also, it is very important to see the electrification not only as a service and not only as an industry, but also as a provider, or as a possible provider of ancillary services for the electric grid and the energy system. We've seen that putting these two together, as Esteban was saying, is coupling both energy sector and transportation electrification into the same strategy can provide benefits for both, and very precisely in terms of usage and generation and storage of renewable energy, and the smart grid management on a local level. So unifying those two is a really wise way to see the electrification of the transport. So many of the countries in the region, they do have NDCs that's ready to transport, that obviously can be helped by the transport electrification. And yeah, more going in deep in some countries in the region and the development of electrification. We have Antigua and Barbuda that they've developed the Sustainable Energy Action Plan that actually talks about this energy efficiency and accelerating the deployment of renewable energy technologies that can be strictly related, as I said, to the transport electrification. But moreover, they have the medium-term development strategy that actually talks about the high-end, as Antigua and Barbuda being, or transforming the country to a high-end tourist destination, green, low-density, high-end tourist destination, that we can see that is a goal that is also set by some of the countries in the region, as Costa Rica, that they are developing some projects to achieve this green tourism and sustainable tourism, providing and reassuring the electric transportation by providing charging infrastructure and pilot vehicles for that. So we can relate many goals in these terms. They had a call for expression of interest for introduction of electric buses and charging infrastructure that I personally don't know how that ended. But this shows clearly that they are approaching, they are going steadily into this electrification of the transport sector. In this term, we do have a project that is been in the last phase of approval by the GEF that is expected to be implemented by end of this year or early next year. That has four main points. That goes for the high-level national coordination and policy development in terms of electric mobility. Then a pilot project to showcase that, as I said, electric mobility and the vehicles that right now are in the market can provide the same service as the one with internal combustion engines. There is this. The next one is the implementation of the the strength of the replicability of the pilot process, meaning creating all those elements that will provide a better framework for electric mobility deployment, such as business models or financing or all those kind of things. And then the development or further policies or regulation to ensure long-term sustainability, meaning other regulations that could provide stronger environment for electric development, such as battery recycling or these kind of adjacent regulations. In terms of Barbados, they have the National Energy Policy that goes from 2019 to 2030. That it sets a really nice goal that is 100% of renewable energy by 2030. That also accounts for right now 350 electric vehicles, more than 50 charging stations, and this month, as I say, they got the 33 electric buses that are part of the Transport Board public vehicle fleet. It's really nice to see that is a really pretty big fleet. It's a bigger fleet than many other really huge countries in the region, that they haven't made this very important big first step. This first step of entering or deploying the first vehicles and the first buses. It actually is a huge achievement for any country. Is the first pilot, the first showcase that it actually can be made. That it is not something impossible. That many countries can do it. So. This is how you can see I'm really excited. This is how it starts. This is how it started in Santiago. In Santiago they started with 3 vehicles and then they got 100. You know, this is how it actually starts a big electrification deployment. In terms of Grenada, in 2011 they adopted the National Energy Policy that relates energy generation and reliable public transport and more efficient public and private vehicles. So really clearly into new energy vehicles. And the GRILEC launched the first pilot program in 2015. So it's also a really big step for the electrification of the transportation sector. In Grenada, we are developing just on the very first stages of developing a project also with GEF that states more or less for the same results, is the institutionalization of low carbon electric mobility, meaning creating national level policies to provide the framework for electrification. A pilot project to remove this barrier to showcase the electric mobility as a very feasible answer to mobility needs in a city. preparing the replication and ensuring the long-term environmental sustainability by creating these related regulation and related business that can support the full industry and full service of electric mobility. Jamaica, in terms of Jamaica, so there's a lot of information in Jamaica in the report that you can see on our website. These two are really new news from Jamaica, is that they completed the general strategy for electric mobility, or the framework for the electric mobility strategy. That is the whole, as I say, public policy that sets the goal and sets the goals, what we want to achieve in terms of electrification in the country. And the public announcement of the Jamaican Public Service to roll out some electric vehicles and public charging infrastructure to provide these basic needs and basic infrastructure for the deployment of electric vehicles. So really keen to see how we can help Jamaica in any way needed and to start electrification of all their vehicles. In St. Lucia, in 2017, it was developed the electric vehicle study that created a lot of information, a lot of data, and a lot of estimation of impacts on how electrification would impact the country. There were 3 electric vehicles introduced as a governmental fleet. We also saw some companies willing to install or willing to provide charging infrastructure, in this case, close to the international airport. And also the National Electric Company that announced the installation of charging points across the city. The charging points installation is pretty basic, like pretty key element for the electrification, as you may think. So the installation and these projects are key to the actual development and actual deployment of electric vehicles in any city and in any country. So it's really, really nice. In terms of St. Lucia, also we are in the last stages of the approval of GEF project. We will be developing more or less the same elements, obviously adapted to what every country needs, but also providing and helping St. Lucia to coordinate plan, the promotion and the electric mobility in the country, capacity building, communicational issues for the users and for the possible buyers of electric vehicles. We helping St. Lucia install a pilot project, and we will help St. Lucia create this environment for replication in terms of business model and financial needs, and finally all these adjacent and related policies in terms of the long-term shoring of the industry and the services itself. And just to end the presentation, I would like to invite you all to the Caribbean-focused webinar series from, as Esteban was mentioning in the presentation, MOVE. As a platform, we have these capacity building sessions every month. From next month on, so next Tuesday, we will have our first webinar focused on the Caribbean countries' need in terms of electrification. We will have the presenter will be Stuart Moorman, focused on the on the section of how electric vehicles and electric transportation relate, and how that relationship can provide benefits, and why the benefits for both sectors. So I invite you all to be there and to attend the presentation. I think it's going to be really, really nice. If you want to join us, our website, where we were talking about that we have all this information and all these publications, is movelatam.org. There we have the next sessions. As I said, the one that is focused on the Caribbean. We will have another one on the 22nd of September that will be in Spanish, about the recycling and second life for batteries, and how that can be a business with a company from Argentina, a company from Costa Rica, showing their business models in terms of battery recycling. So you can go there, click, and to join us in the webinar. Just to let you know, the next topics that we were talking about in the webinars would be this study case on the trolleybus sector of Mexico City, where they did a feasibility study of solar panel implementation on the trolleybus system depots in Mexico City. And it turned out that the electricity generation was almost, so the solar electricity generation will bring almost up to 20% of the energy needs of all the trolleybus system in the city. So there's a pretty nice study case. Then we'll have electric mobility as green transportation anchor, meaning how can electric mobility provide industrial transformation, industrial green transformation for the countries. We'll have business model acquisition, electric bus acquisition business models happening in the region and being implemented in the region. And we will look at green tourism or tourist fleet electrification. I don't know if this will be the exact calendar, meaning one after the other, but these are the main topics. If you have any other question or any other doubt regarding electrification, if you want to know more about any subject regarding electrification, please let us know. We are open to look for panelists and look for themes that may be interesting for you in the Caribbean, and focus on your needs and on whatever you may need. So is our website, and we are really keen to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Joni, for that presentation. Indeed, the subject of electric mobility is a reality in many countries in Latin America and in the Caribbean. And as we see from these two presentations, it is beginning to gain traction in the region. I do have a question here for you, Joni. Just a moment. So Vincent wants to know, are governments considering any incentives for importing electric vehicles? And I do find this to be an interesting question as well, because, you know, this is a question that the average consumer would want to know. Do you have any thoughts on this, Joni?
Yes, so many countries in the region, what they do is that they have two types of incentives for the importation of vehicles. They sometimes have, they lower the entrance or importation tariffs. Normally, it depends a lot of the country, but comparing, for example, Chile, that actually imports all the vehicles, and Mexico, that had a lot of in-house manufacturing of vehicles, they both lower the importation tariffs, so it can range from up to, you know, from 10 to 11% less money, because that would be the importation tariff. And then many of the countries, they do have tariff reduction on the basic new new products. When you buy new product, the normal tax, right? They won't pay that tax. So you will have, apart from the reducing the importing tax and reducing the normal VAT tax, there are some other countries that they do have some reduction on the usage. So you will have free parking, free charging, free highway use. They can be also, for example, in Mexico, we have two electrical readers. So you will have not one for the house usage of electrical usage and one for the vehicle. So the vehicle will have a reduction, a reduced tariff. So there are many ways, depending a lot of the country economy and what is the normal usage of the vehicles. Many countries provide different incentives.
Yes, thanks. And that is an important consideration, because the realities in each country is different and the opportunities available are also different. So that is also something that has to be a part of the multi-stakeholder discussion that has to take place. We go now to another question here from Kristen, and I'll start with you, Esteban. Are there rather any market studies been done in the Caribbean region to ascertain what level of supply of mechanics or vehicle maintenance and financial incentives will be needed to stimulate demand for private electric vehicles?
Thank you. Well, it's right now, not that we know, such a study has been made, even though in some of the countries where we have been supporting the development of these JEF projects, over some months, the team has had to meet with local representatives to better understand the status of the technology in each one of them. So I would say for Antigua and Barbuda, San Lucia, also in Jamaica, led by UNDP, they have been working on this, at least to better understand the sector. And I think in Antigua and Barbuda also a cooperation from the Italian government was made to carry on a study. But for incentives, I would say that it's something that it's not like a one key solution. It depends on the structure of the country, as Johnny was saying. So some countries are focusing a bit more on making the case for the consumer, so the car, the electric vehicle can be more affordable, or maybe providing not just fiscal incentives, but also making it easier for consumers. So providing, for example, more electric vehicle charging points, that those can be incentives as well. And regarding the mechanics and the vehicle maintenance, the thing is that an electric vehicle does not have a gearbox, does not have a radiator, so you don't need to do an oil change, for example. So sometimes people buy an electric vehicle and they just say like, well, see you in right? Different to an internal combustion vehicle. So of course we need to strengthen the capacities of the people and also look for new jobs that can be derived from that. And we're supporting some countries in this transition, because what we have been seeing is that perhaps people that had knowledge in mechanics can then upgrade to a different position related to the operation of fleets, for example. That's something that we're seeing. And the thing is that now, as we were presenting, it's coupling this transport and electricity sector that also opens new opportunities for people involved in this sector.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Esteban. I'm going to go back over to Joni for another question, a follow-up question here from Kristen. What role do you see new versus used electric vehicles playing in the smaller countries? And how do you think this will affect the development of the market and possible incentive schemes?
So in terms of used electric vehicles, I must say that it's still pretty unknown industry. There are not many used electric vehicles. Firstly, because it is pretty new technology, but also because the ones that will be second-hand over to another person, the technology between that vehicle that could be second used and the new ones is really totally different. So the batteries not only have this trend of the price going down, but also have the trend of the energy density going up, meaning that with the same battery, the same storage capacity, or the storage means it can storage more electricity, meaning that the vehicle that will have a maximum range of electric 30 kilometers a few years ago now can do 70. So a person that is going electric, that is going to buy an electric vehicle, will have low incentives to choose a second-hand vehicle rather than a new one, because the second-hand vehicle, even though it will cost less, we still don't have so much information about how the battery has been used in these years and how this person drives. It actually makes a lot of difference how the person drives, the temperature that the vehicle was parked, if the vehicle was parked on the sun or it was in a garage, it is something that we still don't know, because we don't have a history to look at numbers and see exactly what are the kilometers left out of a battery, right? So right now, the second or the used vehicles is not a very common market yet. It will be in a few years, but not yet. And in terms of what can be how can it affect a small country? I think that precisely because it is a small country, the electric vehicles can actually make a bigger impact than in a big country. In the smaller countries that do not have really so big distances among cities, you can put electric infrastructure in the city centers, and then still you will be able to reach that charging point with normal electric vehicles. Let's say one that will give you up to 70 kilometers per charge. That is the normal standard right now. In the big countries, that would be, here from Mexico City, I will need almost to, if I want to go to the side of the city, I will have to charge in the middle almost. So meaning that the possibility of having, of riding in smaller countries means that it's not only, the usage is not only to the urban areas, but it also can expand to more suburban and rural areas also.
Okay, it's very interesting. Thank you, Joni. I do have a question, and then I'll go to Esteban. Samuel wants to know, in the countries where electric buses have been implemented in the region, to what extent has there been private sector participation?
Well, it has been very diverse. So, for example, in the case of Chile, in 2018, maybe Johnny can correct me if I'm wrong, but they introduced 200 buses, and it was private sector initiative. So that actually the city was structuring the tendering process for the buses, but then the private sector moved a little bit faster and introduced 200 buses. The thing is that they developed a very interesting governance structure in which they have an operator an energy provider and also the provider of the technology. And so yes, so the operator, the electricity provider, let's say, and then the technology provider. And each one of them had very specific roles. And then they could deploy the technology and showcase it. So those experiences were used now for this larger scale up in Chile. In some other countries as well, it has the government has been supporting, but it has been the private sector the one making the investments. So it depends, of course, depending on the structure. In some cities, is the local government or the municipality in charge of providing public transport, so they are in charge of the investments. But in some others, it's concessions, or maybe it's just outsourced to a private company. So yes, there are successful experiences of deployment by the private sector, and there have been different ways to deploy those vehicles, not just buying the vehicle per se, but also having leasing arrangements that can lower the initial cost to the one making the investment.
Okay, thank you so much. And it would be interesting to see how some of those pilot projects that you have mentioned can be further replicated in the Caribbean as well, with added private sector.
Sure.
I do have just one final question, and then we'll wrap up. I'll throw this one out to the both of you. I'll start with Joni. Have any small island developing states been able to implement supercharges? And if so, what has been the impact on the grid? This question is from Melissa.
Okay, so I don't really know if any of the islands have already started superchargers, but the impact on the energy grid is really related to the smart grid management. So it does not depend that much of if the infrastructure is fast or not fast, let's say, but having installed a smart charging grid, or smart grid, that actually can benefit from having or incentivizing the usage of the charging infrastructure for the vehicles in the low peak moments, and leading the high peak electricity demand moments for house and house electricity and companies and factories and all that. So it is related on how many chargers and how many vehicles you have and everything, but having this smart grid, having the control and the incentives set correctly, it is the key point of seeing how it will impact on the overall energy of the country or of the region.
Okay. Have we lost Esteban? Okay, I'm still here. All right. Any thoughts from you, Esteban, on this question?
Yeah. Many countries have at least there is not just one source of information for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So we try to compile that in this report that Johnny mentioned. But there are some maps online in which they show the chargers based on their capacity, their install capacity. The thing is that maybe, as Johnny was saying, is that some countries have or will install these fast chargers in which you can charge your vehicle in a few minutes. But the thing is that most of us, of course, it can change in larger cities. We drive less than 30 kilometers per day. So if the battery has a capacity of, say, more than 150 kilometers per day, if I just decrease 30 kilometers, I will charge it very fast, even with a slow charger. And also, if we take into consideration that cars are parked almost 95% of their life right? Because I use it, I drive it, and then the car will be just parked. So it's a bit more about optimizing the use of vehicles and also optimizing the charging. What we saw very interesting is that in Caribbean countries, if you compare it in related to the density of the population and the density of the chargers, some of the Caribbean countries have the largest penetration of chargers in the world, right? Because you don't need that many chargers to supply the whole country. So I think we had some metrics from Barbados in which there are more electric vehicle chargers than gas stations, for example. And the thing is that you don't need to go to a gas station per se to charge your vehicle. You can charge it at home while you're sleeping. Charge it at the supermarket while you're doing your groceries shopping. So that opens new opportunities as well for electric vehicle charging.
Thank you so much, Esteban. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you all for joining us today for another exciting lunchtime webinar session. Unfortunately, we're now out of time. We could certainly continue discussing this as there is so much that we can touch on. I'll now hand over to Vincent for his final words.
Yes, thanks. We have gone over time. So I just want to thank you, Gina, for moderating the session, in addition to our presenters and all of those who raised questions. There are still a couple of questions that had not been answered, but because of time, we will probably have to try and answer these offline. But it demonstrates how interesting this topic is, and I hope that those who were on the call will share the information with their friends so they can also participate in some of the upcoming webinars that were mentioned, in particularly related to electric mobility. So thank you everyone for being here. Thanks to the presenters again, and look forward to our next webinar, which will be at the end of September. With that, I thank you all and wish you a good afternoon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you all. Take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.